Attending your first book or author signing event soon, or do you want to just grab some tips for making the most of the events you attend? Over the past few years, I've been to loads of book signings, talks and conventions, and in that time I've learnt a thing or two I want to share with you. Specifically what to do, what not to do, things to prep before you go, and how you can make the most of any book event you attend. So let's get into it. This is Book Events 101. Let's start by outlining what actually happens at a book signing event, because in the event listing they usually don't really say what happens at the event, but they're all pretty much all the same. At a standard book signing event, for example, one of these Waterstones events or an event at your local bookstore or bookstore chain, here's what you can generally expect. You arrive at the event and the venue, usually a bookstore, is set up with a bunch of seating all facing where the author will be sat. You, of course, will pick your seat and wait. When the event starts, the host of the event, who is usually someone working at the bookstore who's good at this sort of thing, will welcome everyone. They might go through some house rules, which we'll talk about in a bit, and then they'll introduce the author. The author walks in, takes their seat, and once they're settled in, they'll likely be asked to introduce themselves, the book. They may be taken through a series of interview questions from the host, and they might even read an excerpt or a passage from the book itself. After this, if there's time, there will probably be some questions from the audience, and finally the actual signing. The signing itself is usually as simple as forming an orderly queue where you'll get the author's book signed, but it can be more complicated than that depending on what the bookstore wants to happen. Once you have your book signed, you can leave. Those are the basic elements of a book signing event, but let's look a little closer at each step so you can really know what to expect. I'll go through each one, give a little more detail and some of my personal experiences, and then I'll offer up some tips for that point in the event. Starting with arriving at the event. This one might be a personal preference, but when I'm attending a book event, I'm always going to get there early. If the event starts at 7 p.m, they will probably open the doors at 6:30 p.m. The event listing will hopefully say this, but if it doesn't, doors usually open 30 minutes or so before the start of the actual event. For me, this means that if the doors open at 6:30, I'm actually going to get there for 6:20, maybe even a smidge earlier, because I get anxiety and I'm always early. By getting there a little earlier than the doors open, you have more options for seats, and if you want to take photos or film little clips like me, have accessibility needs, or just want to get a better seat, having a good one and lots of options is a must. Okay, so let's say you're there nice and early, the doors are open, and you can go in. Depending on the event, when you first arrive, you'll either be able to collect the author's new book, if you pre-ordered with your ticket, buy the author's book right there in the venue, or you can just take your seat. Even if you don't know if you'll like the book or not, I recommend already having the book or buying it there. There's nothing more sad than really enjoying the author's talk. They've sold the book to you and you don't have it to get signed. Of course, you can usually buy the book at the end of the event or when people are lining up to get theirs signed, but it means you'll probably have to join the back of the line, which while isn't an issue, it means you'll be there for much longer. One of the benefits of waiting until you get to the event to buy the book is that they might have a discount, or they might have different editions like a local bookstore edition that you might not be able to get in many other places. Plus, there's nothing better than buying from your local bookstore. I have in the past gone into the city the event is early, visited the local bookstore and bought the book before the event just so I felt more prepared. You could totally do that too. Make sure though to double check with the venue before going to see if you can buy the book at the event or not. It would be weird if you couldn't, but you never know. After buying or not buying the book, the next step is picking your seat. The spot you pick will depend on your priorities and of course what's available. I like to get little clips and take photos during the event, which means I need a seat that allows me to get some good shots without really getting in anyone's way. If I can, I will opt for the end of a row, ideally in the middle aisle if it exists. If not, I just pick a seat with a decent view and be more conscious of when and how much I'm filming. Generally, I only take little clips, so it's not a big deal. For you, you might have a burning question you want answered and want eye contact with the author when they answer it. If so, you might want to seat closer to the author. Or you might have accessibility needs. You might need to leave early. You might be going for your first time and just want to blend in. Whatever your needs, your seat should accommodate them as much as possible. When the author is introduced speaking, having their interview or reading, your job is easy. You just listen. After this is where you might want to lock in. The questions and answers. If you're a little more socially anxious or nervous like me, don't let your own mind hold you back. If you'd love to ask the author a question, you should, okay? Trust me to say it's worth it to have that connection with the author of a book or story you love, or a new author you just like the vibe of at the talk. It's a great feeling. And there are limited opportunities to have this kind of talk or experience again, especially if the author doesn't live in your country or you're traveling to go to the event. So no matter if you're confident or socially anxious, I recommend prepping your questions before you even get to the event. If you know the author and their work, this task will be fun and will give you some time to think up a question you'd love them to answer. My top tip for this is to keep your questions short and to the point. Not only will it help you remember what they are when you're on the spot and nervous, but it will also help the author give you a more accurate answer. In the past, I've come up with a few questions and written them on my phone. When the Q&A session is announced, I'll open my note app, read through the questions I want to ask, and then stick my hand in the air. If it's helpful, this is a book event, so you can bet at least 60% of the people in the room, probably more, are either introverted or socially anxious in some way. So you're not alone when it comes to nerves. It's all well and good me saying come up with a short and concise question, but let me give you a few examples to get you started. If you had to describe your writing process in 3 words, what would they be? Is there a particular scene or moment in your book that was especially challenging to write? If your main character could give readers one piece of advice, what would it be? What's one small detail in your book that you hope readers notice? What inspired the setting or world in your book? What's the best piece of writing advice you've ever received? If you could visit the world in your book, what's the first thing you'd do there? Because you're asking a question the whole event is going to hear, make sure you don't give away any book spoilers. This is a huge no-no. Even if you're not 100% sure if it's a spoiler or not, don't say it. You really don't want a room full of readers and the author glaring at you for ruining the book. The last thing I'll say on the Q&A section is that sometimes you'll be blessed with the opportunity to add your questions to a Q&A box. This is what they had at the Leigh Bardugo signing I went to. Because she's a very popular author, they had a box near the entrance where you could write your question on a piece of card and put it into the box. At the Q&A section, Leigh pulled out the questions, read them out, and answered them herself. It was fair, random, but had your name on the card so you could still have that connection moment if you wanted to. It was also perfect for people who might have been a little too nervous to ask a question in front of so many people. I honestly think more book events should do this. It was amazing. Okay, we're past the Q&A and it's time for the signing portion. This part varies from venue to venue depending on the house rules. Usually you'll either be told these at the start of the event or right before the signing. There are a few common things in these rules. The first is that they'll tell you how the signing will work. Depending on the size of the event, this could be really simple, like making an orderly line in front of the author table. Or at a larger event, it could be stay in your seat, we'll call your row, and then you can form a line in front of the author's table. Then they'll probably tell you if there are any restrictions on how many books you can get signed by the author. If the event is small, I doubt they'll restrict you. So if the author has a back catalogue and you want multiple books signed, you can probably bring them. If the event is larger or the author is quite popular, you might be limited to 1 or 2 books. The best way to really know, because there's nothing worse than bringing a bunch of books to an event for no reason, is to check the event listing. If it doesn't say, then get in contact with the people hosting the event. They should be able to tell you. They'll also include things in the rules like if photos or videos are allowed and general courtesy stuff like don't take ages. With the rules listed, you'll join the line to wait for the author. At this point, again, if the event is big, people might come up to you with post-it notes asking for your name. They're doing this because they'll write it on the post-it note and stick it in the page of the book you want signed. When the author then opens your book, they'll know exactly how to spell your name and where to put the signature. This kind of thing is very efficient and useful, but it does take some of the personal nature away from the signing if the author is just rattling through people. Although it is great if you have a name that spelling is complicated or people usually mess up. Nobody wants a book signed and their name isn't even right. At this point, while I'm waiting, I'll usually prep my phone to get a photograph or some footage. If I'm with someone else, I'll ask them to do it. Otherwise, there's usually another staff member on hand who might do it for you. At the Leigh Bardugo event, there were staff members who took your phone while you were in line, took photos of you while you were getting your book signed, and then handed you your phone back after. It was honestly like a well-oiled machine. Taking a selfie type photo with an author is usually only reserved for smaller events, sadly. Most of the time, you just don't have the time. While I'm in line, again, because I get anxious, I'll also prep what I want to say to the author. There's honestly nothing worse than clamming up when you get to the author's table and feel like you're saying something utterly pointless. I've done that more times than I can count. If you really like the author and their work, you probably want to say something nice and thoughtful, right? At least I do. So if you're stuck for things to say, here are a few I like. I couldn't stop thinking about your story even after I finished it. Your book made my commute so much more enjoyable. Your book inspired me to start writing my own stories. I've been following your work since your first book. I've been recommending your book to everyone I know. It's that good. I stayed up way too late finishing your book, but it was worth it. Your book made me forget about everything else. I was completely absorbed. I can't wait to discuss your book with my book club. I'm so glad I discovered your work. You've gained a lifelong fan. I found myself daydreaming about your characters long after I finished the book. Your book is definitely one I'll reread many times. I can't wait to see what adventures you write about next. These kinds of statements don't take long to say and they don't hold up the line. They just show appreciation and allow you to get that connection you probably want with the author. The time for questions was earlier, so try to keep it as statements at this point. Although if the event is small, you could probably ask something quick, it won't matter too much. Now I will say, and I know you wouldn't do this because if you're at an author event, why would you? But keep your comments and/or questions positive. Don't criticize the author or ask questions that will obviously get them all riled up. This is an event designed to uplift and celebrate the author after all. You wouldn't want to remain in their memory as somebody who made their experience negative, would you? Once you've said your bit and got your book signed, you can leave. After this point, there's generally nothing left to do, and because the event is usually in the evening, the bookstore will probably close once everybody has left. So you're done. So there's just one more thing to talk about, what you bring with you to the event. I've walked you through the general makeup of a book signing event, so you can probably guess some of the things you'll want to bring with you. But in case you need it, because these things can slip out of our mind when we're nervous, here's a little checklist of things to bring with you. The author's book if you've already bought it. Also bring additional backlog books if you're allowed to. Something to protect the book you're bringing or going to buy. I live in the UK, so it's probably raining when I leave. I don't want my newly signed book to get wet, so I'll bring something waterproof to wrap around it. This is usually just another bag. Your phone. You'll probably have this on you anyway, but if you want to take photos or videos, having a fully charged phone is a must. I also use this to take notes if the author says something I particularly like, or you could bring a notebook to write these notes down. Some kind of drink. Just water is great, but sometimes book signing events can last from 1 to 2 hours depending on their size, and you want to be hydrated. Your prepared Q&A questions and/or what you want to say to the author. Again, this can live on your phone or in your notebook. That should probably cover it. If you can think of anything else though, leave it in the comments. Never be afraid of looking too prepared at an event like this. Even if you're sitting there with your notepad and pen out, this event is for you. It's a chance for you to connect with the author you like, so put your enjoyment and needs first. As long as you're not ruining the experience for anybody else, what you do is your business. Now go forth and enjoy these events, and if you do use any of these tips, please let me know. Also, if you have any additional tips to add, leave them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time for another video.